Hello, welcome back. I'm Jim LaPierre. This is Sober Now. Today's topic is learning to accept our limitations. Would love to hear from you. What questions do you have? What comments do you have? What's going on in your recovery? How can we be helpful to you today? Just type in on any of the streams that we have going. If you haven't already been over there, please check out Sober Now's Facebook page. Give it a quick like. You'll get notified about future live streams and other content that we're creating. All right, let's just jump into it. Accepting limitations is not something that we're good at. We're people who tend to live at the extremes, and we tend to only recognize our limits once we've gone past them. So if you're not sure what your limits are, then what's going to happen is you're going to keep running into them, usually face first, and you'll keep running into this wall. And if you're anything like me, it's going to take you a long time to realize that the wall is you, the limits of what you can do, the limits of what you can do alone. This is particularly true in our recovery process. I watch a lot of folks live their life through certain patterns and cycles. And in recovery from substance use disorder, those patterns are most observable in terms of month-long periods, 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months especially. They represent the limit that a person has about how far they can go in recovery alone. And then sooner or later we relapse, sooner or later we implode or explode, sooner or later we find that this is as far as we can go alone, and we need to be willing to break through the fear, the anxiety, the shame, the guilt, whatever it is that's preventing us from connecting with those who have lived experience and can help us. This is one of the greatest limits that we're going to face in our lifetime. And if we have a willingness to be awkward, to just embrace a little bit of vulnerability, it's incredible what can happen. But I get it. A lot of us just stay stuck in fear, stay stuck in shame, and this is what's most limiting to us. We need a lot of help getting out of our own way. I've learned that, the most limiting thing for me is whatever it is that I'm doing it alone. I've done it way too many times. At best, I'm lonely, and at worst, I'm self-destructive. I need to be in the company of good people, and people that understand me, relate to me, speak my language. I need support and encouragement, but more than anything, I need accountability for my goals as well as my limits. I push really hard, and left to my own devices, I will push too far, too hard, and too long. And that leads me to burnout. Professionally, I've burned out multiple times. I'm fond of saying that I'm a slow learner with a high pain tolerance. Today, I know that the lessons that I'm not willing to learn are going to bring me to my knees, so I try to go there voluntarily. I try to keep myself surrounded with people who won't hesitate to tell me that I'm wrong, people who are checking my blind spots, people that my higher power easily works through, because my plans are never even a fraction as great as my higher power's plans. And I need to recognize, I'm always encouraging people to take stock, not analyze, not overthink, but take stock, introspection, and kind of separate what's going on in your head, what's going on with your heart, and what are you sensing from your gut. And if you practice those three simple things, it's going to allow you to notice when you're conflicted. It's going to allow you to notice that sometimes your heart hijacks your head. Sometimes my heart lies to me. It wants to believe that I can just do so much more and I don't have any limits, and obviously it's okay to keep pushing and taking on new things. And it's just not true. I think often of my friend artists who would say to me, we're not really human beings because we don't know how to just be. We're human doers because we take all of our worth from what it is that we create, what it is that we do for others. We find it hard to relax. We find it hard to be present with self. But to have health, to have success and happiness, I think is largely a product of learning how to just be. So what are our limits? Well, we're limited by being human, which is a cause of consternation for many of us. We need sleep, we need good food, we need to hydrate and exercise. But I can look back at times where I was chugging my fourth Red Bull of the day because I'm sleep deprived while going through a drive-through to get something that I shouldn't be eating. Devoting just the very basics of self-care are boring. But what they make possible is pretty incredible. Learning new routines and habits, getting yourself organized. None of these things come naturally to us. But what they make possible in your life, that's the good stuff. So accepting the need for self-discipline, accepting the need to maintain a good self-care regimen, doing at least minimal commitments in terms of your health and your organization are going to reduce stress, which is going to improve your immune system, your holistic health. And again, always incorporating people in our lives who are following up, holding us accountable. Are you doing the things that you said that you'd be doing? We're limited largely by how it is that we choose to relate to ourselves. Too many of us are fighting losing battles for self-control. And I promise you, you can have far greater self-control through self-acceptance than you could ever have by, well, we justify it, right? We say that we just have high standards for ourselves. I'm just hard on myself. But too often what we're really doing is being our own worst enemy. We're limited by our inner critics and our old tapes. We're limited by fear and how we choose to cope with fear. I'm convinced at this point in my journey, how we choose to deal with fear really determines the lion's share of what's possible in our lives. We're limited by the size of our comfort zone, and the good news about that is your comfort zone is made of this really stretchy material. So every time you go outside of it, it can get a little bit bigger. We're limited by mental illness, by past trauma, by resentments, by pain that we haven't released. I hear from folks all the time that they just want to be happy and they just want to have a good life. And I say, well, maybe learning how to grieve will take you a long way in that direction. If you want to feel good, letting go of what weighs you down and pressures you and makes your life unmanageable would be a big step in that direction. But of course, we all want shortcuts to happiness and we all want a softer, gentler way. Obviously, it doesn't work that way. We're limited by shame and guilt, which is really sad considering that a lot of what we hold on to doesn't truly belong to us. Learning how to forgive ourselves will take you a long way towards a better life. If you take stock, you'll often find that what you're ashamed of isn't anything that we did, but rather what was done to us. I often recommend to folks, watch Goodwill Hunting. There's a scene towards the end of the movie where Robin Williams, playing a psychologist, corners Matt Damon in his office, and he just keeps saying to him over and over again, it wasn't your fault. Too much of what we redirect at ourselves, what we punish ourselves for, is what we experience as children. And getting some outside help with that can take us a very long way. I like recommending movies. I often will say to people, watch Shawshank Redemption. And notice that Andy doesn't really seek a better life until he feels like he's punished himself enough, has suffered enough. And that's one more thing that limits us. We don't know how much is enough of anything, whether it's good or bad. If you want to bust through some limits in a hurry, read about adult children of alcoholics and addicts. Read the laundry list of Al-Anon. We're limited by the roles that we were cast into as children. We're limited by the characteristics that we took on and developed growing up in families of neglect, abuse, and addiction. Most of us never break free of those roles. Most of us never overcome those ingrained behaviors. Most prominently, things like self-doubt, things like our propensity to treat ourselves poorly, our propensity for taking on responsibility for the well-being of others, whether it's being a caregiver or a rescuer, examining those roles, noticing that it was something that was placed upon us and making a conscious choice about whether or not we're going to keep doing that. That's a road to freedom. That's a road to a much more manageable life. We're limited by false beliefs. We're limited by ideas like not being good enough or being too much. We're limited by not feeling safe. And it's one of the most important things that we could be talking about. Safety is the most basic and primal of human needs, but to feel safe in our own skin takes a lot of growth and recovery. To feel safe in our own head takes a lot of growth. To feel safe in our own homes sometimes takes growth and sometimes takes very pragmatic change. Living with abuse is limiting, and no one deserves any form of domestic or intimate partner violence. We are limited by our self-harm. We're limited by eating disorders, by obsessions and compulsions that destroy us. We're limited by our willingness to seek support within our fellowships or from outside help. The service a therapist most often provides to us is pointing out the simple and obvious truths that we've forgotten or avoided or been conflicted about or been in denial about. It's amazing how simple most of our problems are, and yet how much we complicate them, how much we overthink them. As I was thinking about that, it brought to mind a lyric from a band called the Congos. The song is Come With Me Now. And the lyric is, afraid to lose control and caught up in this world. I've wasted time, I've wasted breath. I think I've thought myself to death. I'm a big proponent of the Keep It Simple system. What I know is that I've met an awful lot of people who told me they were complicated and none of them were. Sometimes we have a lot going on, but that doesn't mean that it's complicated. It means that we have to stop just thinking about it and bring it out into the open. Things become more manageable once we make them overt. Things become more manageable when we share them with others. Things become more manageable just when we write them down. I'm a huge fan of journaling. I'm a huge fan of making lists. And one of the ways that I recognize that I'm pushing my limits too much is when just writing down the important things that I'm doing in my life, just writing down, here's what's going on at work, here's what's going on in my volunteerism, here's what's going on in when I'm teaching, when I'm doing this project. I'm at a point in my life where the thing that I want most is another project, and the last thing in the world I need is another project. And I can easily justify doing too much because everything that I get to do is really great stuff. All of my problems are good problems. But that doesn't mean that my limits changed, right? In anything, my limits increase as I get older. I get to push limits in healthy ways because of the lessons I've learned and because of the people that I've incorporated into my life, because of the support that I have, the people that collaborate with me, the people that want to create with me. And I'm fond of saying that creating is great because when I'm creating, I'm not destroying myself. Emotions are messy, but not feeling them and expressing them is severely limiting. Learning how to identify, express, and cope with a full range of emotion is a huge benefit in recovery. We have a habit of stuffing them, and repressing our emotions over time is the biggest part of what leads to depression, anxiety, rage. So many of our struggles are simply a product of our baggage, things that we repressed, conflicts within ourselves, things that we're avoiding outside of ourselves. And these all weigh us down, these all limit us. They tire us, and that's two things that I hear most from people in recovery. I'm just tired, and that's always a lie. When somebody's tired, all they need is a nap. We're not tired, we're drained, because we have a tendency to give and give and give, and then when we run out, we're angry. We experience compassion fatigue. We are resentful about how much we do for others and how little is coming back to us. And so I say to folks, this is a great time to take stock. Like, what are you asking for? What needs do you have that you're asking to be fulfilled by others? What needs do you have that you can't meet yourself? Too many of us pride ourselves on some overblown idea about independence when the truth is we're simply afraid to ask. But even more foundationally, we have to be willing to be mindful. We have to be willing to pay attention to ourselves and notice what it is that we need, because you can't ask for it if you don't know what it is. Ideally, over time, we develop a greater awareness of self, which leads to a better understanding of self. but at the cost of identifying the wounds that we still have, the false beliefs that we still live by, the unmet needs from our childhoods. All of this is very messy. And I think because we don't expect anybody to really understand us, because we see ourselves as terminally unique, we don't really talk about these things or share them with people we trust until we feel like we totally understand them ourselves, which is a bad direction to go in, because that just leads to overthinking, overanalysis, and I think if we can just allow ourselves to be awkward and just vent, just spew, just say to somebody, here's what it feels like for me, here are the areas that I know I'm struggling with, please give me some feedback about what you notice about me or things that you feel like I could be doing better. I think all roads ultimately lead us back to the need for self-acceptance, and I will often ask people, what is it about you that you see as so unacceptable? And sadly, those are usually past traumas, past memories, experiences. They're not who a person is. They're things that happen to us. They do not represent our worth. They are not a reflection of our character. They are simply parts of ourselves that we try to distance ourselves from, things that we want to forget, even though we know there is no forgetting. I've been talking with folks recently about the benefits of introspection and taking stock, and how much courage it takes to know what it is that you really want. It's scary to do that. Once you have that knowledge, once you have that insight, it creates a responsibility. When you don't know what it is that you want, then there's no responsibility. There's nothing you actually have to do necessarily. But when you know that this is what you really want, or this goal, or this dream, or this job, or this relationship is the thing that you really want to pursue, then you have a lot of responsibility. You have to work towards it. And for most of us, deep in our hearts, there's this very childish voice that says, yeah, but I don't want to. Or there's an authority figure that we don't want to, or we're afraid to approach, or that we expect to treat us poorly. And so ideally, our adult self notices that there's parts of us that feel like a young child, parts of us that feel like a teenager that wants to rebel and be angsty. And ideally, we start getting on the same page with ourselves by nurturing ourselves, by responding to ourselves the way we respond to other people, with kindness and with respect. I think ultimately we come to set boundaries with ourselves, and I don't think we think about it that way. We think of boundaries as things we set with other people, not with ourselves. But your limits are boundaries in and of themselves. The problem is that accepting them is always optional. I'm very fortunate. I get to have a lot of opportunities to practice what I preach. So whatever it is that I say to my clients, I want to make sure that I'm living by that too. And I learned even more about this by being a supervisor and being an employer. I learned that I don't want the people who work for me to keep pushing keep pushing their limits constantly, because I know that isn't healthy for them. And so, again, I get to practice what I preach. That motivates me, that drives me, and I don't like being a hypocrite. So this is good practice. I think sponsorship works in much the same way. I think there's a ton of opportunities for us going forward. And I'm just checking the live stream real quick. Want to get your comments and questions. Okay, we're a quiet group today. I always, of course, want to invite you to connect with me. Jim@sobernow.com is the easiest way to do that. Please let me know if I can answer questions for you, or be a resource in your recovery. Please check out Sober Now's YouTube channel. Well over 100 videos there, completely free. And please check out our website, sobernow.com. Great home study programs for folks who are looking to advance their recovery from substance use disorder, and for folks like myself who identify as affected others. So please check out those programs. I'll look forward to